So hello, everyone, and welcome to Innovation Guelph Presents Toolkit Tuesday. I'm Adelaide Manley, Program Manager for our startup program here with Innovation Guelph, and I'm very excited to be hosting today's call. I'd first like to welcome our two friendly American Sign Language interpreters, whose time today is graciously provided in kind by Asign, Jeanette, and Courtney. Thank you both for joining us, and thank you to Asign. Thank you as well to Sarah Douglas, Program Coordinator with Innovation Guelph, who is supporting all of the behind the scenes and Zoom webinar elements with us today. While I'm at it, I'd also like to thank our corporate sponsors, Ernst & Young, Reese Informatica, Invest in Guelph, and BDO. We're very grateful for their support. Before beginning the session today, I would like to give recognition to the land that Guelph is on. We acknowledge that many others here today may be on a different territory, so we invite and encourage each of you to give recognition to the land you occupy today and every day. As we gather for today's event, we are reminded that Guelph is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. As an organization in this city, we have a responsibility for the stewardship of the land on which we live and work. Today, we acknowledge the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation of the Anishinaabe peoples on whose traditional territory we are meeting. Today's webinar is called Grant and Funding Application Tips and Tricks for Writing Winning Proposals with Barbara Robinson, owner of River Road Creative. In case any of you are new to Innovation Guelph, I'd like to provide a quick background. So Innovation Guelph is one of 17 regional innovation centers in Ontario. And while we are located in Guelph, we serve the entire region of Southern Ontario, and we have a national program. This means that while most of our clients are relatively close by, we do have clients in British Columbia, all the way to Nova Scotia, and throughout the province of Ontario. We work with our clients, supporting them throughout multiple stages of business growth, from startup to scale up, with lots of programs and workshops, events, and networking opportunities. But enough about us and more about Barbara. So led by Barbara Robinson, owner of River Road Creative, they are a team of creative and strategic thinkers, subject matter experts, writers, and graphic designers. A social enterprise focused on optimizing opportunities and advancing the goals of businesses, governments, and nonprofit organizations. They're champions at bringing out the best in their clients. Should you have any questions for Barbara today, we do encourage you to use the Q&A feature, and we will be monitoring your questions throughout today's call when the moment appears and Barbara prompts to take in some questions. Barbara, I would like to officially hand the screen over to you for today's Toolkit Tuesday.
Thank you, Adelaide and Innovation Guelph. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm glad to see so many people coming out on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon. It's yeah, I'm looking forward to this presentation, and I hope that I can add some value and maybe inspire and give some confidence to the grant and proposal writing process. So I'm just going to share my screen. Thank you. So yes, tips and tricks for writing grants and proposals, and Adelaide gave a great introduction there. I just, a little bit more about my business. I have been working mostly in communications services, but sort of evolved into grant and proposal writing. Today, I'm going to just give just sort of an outlay of the agenda here, provide an introduction focusing on writing grants and proposals. I'm going to give you some takeaways, and we're going to have some time at the end for discussion and questions. So a bit of my background, as I said, I've got about 20 years experience in proposal and grant writing, and also evaluation. Generated about $2 million, which in the fundraising world is actually not a lot of money. But as I said, I'm not a full-time fundraiser. I've just ended up doing a lot of fundraising and applying for requests for proposals. Today, I'm going to talk about two different kinds of grants and proposals. One is grants for funding, which is funding to help a company grow or reach milestones, specific issue funding, and funding that comes from foundations and sectors. For example, Agriculture Canada may have a funding stream to help businesses that advance innovative agriculture. The other type of proposal I'm going to talk about is requests for proposals, which I'm going to refer to as RFPs. Not a big fan of acronyms, but it's just shorter and more efficient for this presentation. So requests for proposals, these are opportunities to be paid for products or services. So for example, if you're a writer like I am, you might apply to write an annual report. These types of opportunities are typically on government websites, private sector websites, organizational websites. I've listed Mercs.com here. Mercs, or Buy and Sell Canada, is a government site, federal government, and if you haven't ever looked at it, I encourage you to do so, because it's really amazing to look at where the government is investing their money, and it's often quite topical. For example, right now you'll see quite a few opportunities for diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. You'll see quite a bit of work going on with climate change, and because it's summer, you'll see quite a bit of work going on the municipal sites for construction. But just fascinating. I mean, I've seen requests for proposals to supply potato chips. So it's really interesting just to have a look at that, to see where our government is investing. So for me, the key steps in the grant and proposal process, there's four of them. There's the finding the grants and the RFPs. So where you find them. I'm not going to talk a lot about that today, but I can certainly answer some questions at the end if people want to. And by the way, if people have questions throughout, please pop them in the chat line. I don't mind pausing or put your hand up, and Adelaide or Sarah at Innovation Guelph can let me know that you have a question. So step one is finding the grants and RFPs. Step two is writing grants and proposals. Step three is undertaking the work. So if you actually get the money, the funding, or the job. And step four is stewardship. Stewardship is this really key piece that you could actually circle right back to step one, because it really is about building a relationship and connection with a client or a funder. Today, we're going to focus on step two, which is writing grants and proposals. So where do I start? The first thing I do, and when I talk about this today, this is what I do. It's maybe not what everyone does, but this is what has worked for me. So the first thing I do is what I call the quick assessment. So I want to know really quickly, really fast, if this is going to be worth my time. So I'm going to look at the deadline, right? And you get to know where to look on these things, you know, whether it's a RFP or a grant opportunity. Is there time to apply? Do I meet all of the criteria? And in these days of accountability and I guess accountability and better business practices, typically you need to meet all of the criteria. If you're not sure, you can always ask, but I look at them as whether I meet all of the criteria. Thirdly, is it a good fit? Does my company, you know, do the kind of work that they would be interested in? Do we have similar values? Is the content similar? And then next, I would look at the value. Is it worth my while in terms of what's being offered? Like, if it's an RFP, is it a budget of that I think is worth putting the time into and going to sustain me? A lot of these RFPs are, they'll ask you for an estimate. So sometimes you don't even know. For grant applications, they'll usually tell you a number, and maybe they're going to give, $50,000 to 10 companies, or maybe it's $100,000 to one company. So these are the kinds of things you need to think about. What are my odds, and is it worth it? This is all really, really important, because preparing one of these proposals or applications is a lot of work. And it gets easier in terms of what you need to do, but each one is always unique. It's like when you used to apply, or maybe you still do apply for jobs, you have to tailor your CV. You have to tailor your business to meet what they're looking for. So once I've decided that it's a good fit, that I want to pursue it, preparation. Benjamin Franklin said, by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. So I don't know why it's doing that. The preparation is key. So just a little technical challenge here. We're going to push through. Preparation is the key. Now, I'm going to ask a question for the chat. Does anyone know what RTM stands for? RTM was something like an acronym that was used. I don't know if it's still used, but does anyone know what it is? If you do know, put it in the chat. Okay, so maybe no one knows. No, good guess though. RTM is read the manual. It used to be this thing years ago. It still should be a thing about, you get like a new stove and you just start using it and you have no idea what it does. I have an example of that with my car. I bought a used car from my niece, and I had it for about 5 years. I live downtown Guelph, and I always lock my car. And one night I didn't lock my car, and I came out and my car was completely rifled through. I didn't have anything in it, but you could tell it was rifled through. I mean, nothing of value. And I sat in the car and I looked up and I thought, wow, what's that? And it was a holder for my sunglasses. Cool. I've been driving this car for 5 years and I didn't know that was there. So look up, look around. There's maybe lots of things you can learn. So the first thing you need to do, and I don't know why this is happening here. Let's just see. I'm going to go back to here. Yeah, I'm having, okay, here we go. Apologies for this. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to read the RFP or the grant call. This is so important to read what you're getting into, to understand what the organization is about. You can understand how bureaucratic they are or not. So you're going to read the RFP or the grant call, and then you're going to read it again. So key to understand. As you do more of these, you'll learn how to skim through them more. But as you're getting to know them, you really, really need to read the entire piece. Don't learn things the hard way or after the fact. Sometimes things will be buried, especially in an RFP. It might be a security requirement that's not in the main body that says you must have top secret government security to work on this project. The people writing these RFPs are not always thinking about you. So something to remember. So then I create a checklist, and a sample criteria is, they might ask your corporate profile, what your project is, what your approach is. With an RFP, that's typically your methodology, what impact you're going to have, and what the budget is, the cost to do it, or what funding you're requesting if it's for a grant application. And then I do sort of a draft format, and that's going to be the same list that the reviewer uses. With online applications, what I do is I take everything off the online application in terms of what the questions are, number of characters, number of words, and I put it into a Word document or a word processing document. And that's just going to be an easier way to work with it. And then at the 11th hour, you can pop it back in to the online application. It's really the best way to work. And it also gives you an opportunity to do lots of reviewing. And if you've got, let's say, 300 words to put about your company, you can really get into the fine-tune editing, and that's important. Advanced preparation. This is something to keep in mind at the beginning. So once you read the RFP or application, and do the sample, figure out the sample criteria in the draft format, you need to know, are there things that I'm going to need in advance? For example, am I going to need reference letters? Am I going to, have to get finances from the bank? And these are things that take time. And so you want to get started on those right away. Do I need to get some photographs? Do I need something written, anything that takes time, that is a bit out of your hands, but that you can request, is something that you want to do as soon as possible. So, and then I typically do a list like this. And again, I'm following the format, the proposal title, company profile, project, and I'm looking, do I understand what the criteria is? Do I meet the criteria? Do I have questions? A lot of times with RFPs, there will be an opportunity to ask questions, and they'll publish that. So you'll want to get your questions together to ask them, and you'll want to ask them at the same time instead of like 3 different emails. And you'll want to do that sooner than later. And then typically what they'll do is they'll publish all of the questions as an addendum. With online applications or applications for grants, they don't always do that, but often there's a contact name, and I found some good success in just talking to the contact person just to make sure we're on track. They want to help you too, so that's another way to to sort of prepare. And then you want to learn about the company. This is, I call the discovery process. So, and this is really, really key. People, you've heard this saying that people want to be heard. Well, companies want to be heard too. They want to know that you get them. And you do that by researching and learning. And typically you can get most of this information online. Maybe you have a contact, who knows, but you want to learn as much as you can about them. You want to know who they funded or hired in the past. With RFPs, let's say it's a government RFP, they'll typically list the other companies that are applying or that have requested information. So you get a sense of what your competition is like. For grants, you can look at the success stories. Companies always want to promote these sorts of things. So usually those will be published as well. You want to look at what their priorities and interests are as well. And then you want to identify themes and wording for your proposal. And this is a bit of a slippery slope, because you want to relate to them without, and have them be able to relate to you without mimicking them. Okay, so you don't want to throw their words back so much that you're just throwing their words back, but you want them to see themselves in you. You want to look at, do they have overarching programs, like an umbrella program that all of this fits under? You just really want to get to know everything about them. And by looking at some of this past information, you can also see, relate it back to your own project or qualifications, and see if it's going to advance their goals. Really looking to solve a problem for them and make them look good. That's, and that's why thinking like a reviewer, and I'm going to touch on that again and again. You really need to think like a reviewer. You're going to follow them on social media if you can. That's going to give you a sense of, what's the current buzz with the company. What are their interests? What's their style? Is it really formal? Is it informal? And also you're just going to be, it's another network, another connection. So, and then the last one is sort of what are the synergies with my project, which kind of pulls all of this together. With my project or with my expertise, typically with grants, they're funding projects. They're not going to fund, a staff person, typically. They're not going to fund new equipment, typically. They're going to fund a project that takes your company to the next level. So here's this piece, think like a reviewer. If there's one thing you take away from this presentation, I hope it's think like a reviewer, your audience. What do they need and how can you make sure they get it? Your job is to make their job easier. So think about this. World Bank has about they've got all kinds of like funding, grant opportunities. They're quite philanthropic. And they get about 20,000 applications a year. This was a few years ago. They probably get more now. So, but getting 20,000 applications a year, I did the math on it, and it works out to be 2 people working full-time, 8 hours a day for a year, giving about 45 minutes a day to each proposal. So you want to make their job easier. You want to make them sit with you for that 45 minutes or an hour and really understand what you're all about and that you've followed the order. You don't want to make work for them. You don't want to make them go, huh, or confused. You really need to think about that reviewer. I can't stress that enough. So the project or business case, again, we use this as sort of a template at the beginning. Typically, these are the sorts of things that are asked. Every application, every request, every RFP, and every call for grant applications is different. And just because you've done one doesn't mean that it's going to make it a bit easier, but doesn't mean that you have the collateral for the next one. They really need to be customized. Again, going back to listening to what the client or the funder wants. So the company profile, what makes my business unique? You want it to be comprehensible. You want it to be clear. You want your passion to come through. You want to show how you're changing the game. You want to stand out. These sorts of things. And typically, it's not a lot of space to do that, especially if it's online. If it's a response to an RFP, which is kind of an open-ended thing for those of you who know them. I mean, they just tell you to submit a proposal. So you've got kind of carte blanche. But what I recommend for that is not just popping that company brochure at the front. Really customize it and just think about, again, the reviewer. I've received proposals before that are the first 10 pages are the company brochure, which aren't answering really any of the questions. They're very general about the company. It's too much. I can find that on a website. I want that company profile that directly connects to what I'm asking for, what I'm doing. So your proposed project, what you want funded, if it's a grant, what problem does it solve? And if it's the case of an RFP, then usually they're looking at, there's a statement of work and they're looking for what your experience is. So, how many years have you been doing this? Have you done this before? That sort of thing. And the approach, how are you going to do this? So it's typically a really high level outline of, what you're going to do, first year, second year, maybe third year. And be careful to avoid the step-by-step process because it's tedious for them to read. And, obviously you're going to do a lot of those things. So just keep it high level of what really matters in terms of the steps. For an RFP, that's a methodology, they usually call it. So how are you going to do this work? Well, you're going to maybe do, some research, you're going to do some interviews, whatever it is, but again, high level. The budget, how much do you need and how you will use the money. This is really kind of the crux of it. And a lot of the reviewers are going to be accountants and number crunchers. So that's something to keep in mind. It's got to be detailed and realistic. Funders need to know that you have a clear understanding of the costs as well, and that you have a clear understanding of business. And basically the budget is all the costs associated with carrying out the project. For an RFP response, that's typically going to be how much do you charge could be by the hour or for the project. So the impact and evaluation, how's your project going to make a difference? So what are the community benefits, for example? And this goes back to that discovery of what they're looking for. So how are the outcomes of your project going to add value to their portfolio of, funding? Or in the case of an RFP, how are you going to do the work for them, do it well, not pose any trouble, stay within budget, do it on time, that sort of thing. I'm going to just pause here. Does anyone have any questions or want to jump in with anything? Okay. I see Carol Johnston has a hand raised. Be happy to take a question.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I can't see anybody else. So I'm just curious if, and maybe you'll share this later, do you have examples, maybe change the names, protect the innocent, of like really good RFPs or grant proposals that you could share? Or maybe a better question to ask is, one in particular in the past that stood out to you that you said they nailed it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Carol, are you talking about for grants or for RFPs?
Either. I mean,
okay.
Both. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple of case studies, and I'm gonna I might as well touch on them now. One, do I have something on paper? I mean, I could put something together. I mean, typically with a good response to a request for proposal, RFP, you're going to have a cover page with the details. You're going to have a table of contents. You're going to number pages, and you're going to have a letter of introduction. But let me talk about that in a bit. And if I forget, just remind me, okay, in the question period, because I think I touch on it a little bit. I don't actually show it here, but that might be a good idea for the next presentation I do, because I have been asked this before, and I think it's a really good question. So I'm just going to move forward here and then pick up on Carol's question after. So writing tips. This is my favorite part. I'm a writer. I love writing. I love communicating. So I've organized it into basically 6 different areas. Plain language. Okay, so this is so key, and that's a buzzword, plain language, that I never get tired of. Clear, concise, compelling, no fancy fonts. You know, if you just want to make it simple, again, thinking about the reviewer. Where applicable, use page numbers, no acronyms, no technical jargon. Page numbers are so key if you're printing something, if they have to print something out. In the case of an online application, it's a non-issue because everything's in order. But if it's something where you're actually developing a proposal, it's the simplest thing, page numbers. Like a lot of this stuff, it just seems so simple, so obvious, but so many people don't do it. So page numbers, no acronyms. Okay, you know what this acronym means, but your reviewer may not. And again, you want to keep their life simple. You want to solve issues for them. You may, at the beginning of a section, let's say it's the Nature Conservancy of Canada, their acronym is NCC. You may then use NCC in that section, but you always want to spell it out. No technical jargon. You know, these reviewers, they probably don't know the technical aspects of your work. They may, but you don't want to assume that. So be really careful about how you present information, especially in technology and innovation. You really just want to, like, it's important not to use that technical jargon. Grammatically correct, another one seems so obvious. So many proposals and applications get turned away because people are rushed, they miss words, the spelling, you know, punctuation. It's really, really important. No exclamation marks ever. That's what I stand by. You may not agree. I know some people don't agree, but you're really excited about your project, but the words should speak for themselves. I've had proposals where like every second sentence had an exclamation mark. You know, we are proud to say we are this, we've accomplished this, and they just stop meaning anything. So in a proposal, this is a formal process and request. So I just say keep them out. Obviously no typos. Correct spelling of names and organizations, etc. This, again, it seems so obvious, but I mean, people have misspelled my name. My name is Barbara Robinson because they've called me Barb, right? Which I'm not a fan of, right? So just look at how the information has been presented to you. This is Barbara Robinson, Communications Director, River Road Creative. Take the time to make sure you get it right. If you're not sure about the proper name of an organization, and you should almost always assume you're not sure, Google it to make sure that you're using the official name of the site on, or the name that's on the website. Style. I mean, again, this is the compelling storyline, the emotional engagement. Make sure that they can relate to it. You know, you really want to convey your passion for it and also the power of it. Connect. They need to see your priorities, their priorities, sorry, and values in your proposal. This is really, really important. As I said about, you know, not mimicking, but associating with what their interests are. It could be innovation, it could be community. Do the math. This is a really big one for me because I'm not great at math. Apparently that's what people tell me. Make sure your numbers add up. The grantors are often number crunchers, so you really got to double check those numbers. And I would say it's like numbers too, like dates, right? Like make sure that your dates aren't, you know, conflicting. And then revisit that checklist continually. Continue to keep the reviewer in mind and continue to make sure you're making progress and getting everything you need for your application. Considerations, and this is a question that I often get asked is, should I include extra information, samples, etc. in my proposal? Well, they've asked for 3 samples, but I've got 5 great samples. I'm going to send them 5. no, 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 you're not, because then you confuse them, right? They've asked for 3 and they're going to evaluate 3. So now do they evaluate the first 3, the last 3? And it also reflects that maybe you're not listening to them. So if they say as many samples as you want, that's one thing, but make sure they're high level samples that add value. Extra information, I go back to that list that was asked for, and that's what I include in the request for proposal or in the grant. Sometimes, and well, actually not even sometimes, often where I make an exception with, especially with a request for proposal and RFP, is I will at the very end, and I put it in the table of contents at the very end, I will include diversity, equity, inclusion policy, my environmental policy, my social responsibility policy. And that's about 2 pages. That's at the very end. It doesn't affect the order of everything else they've asked for. So yeah, timeline. This is another one. Connect the project to the grant or RFP timeline. Let's say, for example, the deadline for this application I'm doing is June 20th, it's today. And you got to know or figure or allow for the time it's going to take them to review proposals or grant applications. Sometimes they'll tell you that they're going to announce it by such and such a date. A lot of times with requests for proposals, they don't. So you don't know. So if June 20th is the deadline, I'm not going to promote a project that I want funding for that starts July 15th or even August 15th, maybe. So what I recommend is a more general approach. So you could say this project is going to take 3 months, and month 1, month 2, month 3. That's one way around that. Contacting, should I reach out during the process? I always say no to this, just because it's kind of like Revenue Canada. You don't want to draw attention to yourself. You want to just keep things, going. You don't want to, I mean, sometimes drawing attention to yourself can work in your favor, but sometimes it doesn't. So just kind of keep a low profile. Usually no news is no news. So yeah, so I would wait, especially if it's like a few months. It takes a long time. Now, if they said they were going to announce July 1st and we're now July 20th, it doesn't hurt to, and you haven't heard any announcements, it doesn't hurt to inquire politely. So the great double check, this is where once you have everything put together, you're going to review, revise. Like, I can't stress enough how important the review is. You want to, if you can, I know a lot of times it's rushed, but I would always encourage a second set of eyes. Ideally, someone who is really familiar with your work, perhaps a colleague, associate on your team, and then someone who's maybe not, just to see that, just to make sure they can, understand that the language is plain enough, that it's clear. And then I go back, I revise, I revisit, I check my numbers. For me, submitting an RFP, believe it or not, takes about 4 workdays of my time. It's so much work. It's I know it's hard to believe, and that's why you really want to make sure it's viable, that there's a good shot at doing this. And then you hit send. It's submitted, and then what I do, I just generally try and forget about it and move on to something else. So what if my project is not accepted? And this happens way more than the other possibility, which is the project being accepted. And you kind of get used to rejection, and you kind of, you learn from it. One of the things, especially with an RFP, is you can ask for a debrief. You can ask why it wasn't accepted, or what skills you could work on. With government and a lot of times with organizations, they'll tell you. We used to have one-on-one meetings where people would actually come into the office and we would talk about why their proposal didn't work. times have changed, and now it's probably going to happen by email, but you can get, I would encourage you to ask if possible. And sometimes with the grant process, they're just too busy. They have too many, but sometimes they'll respond, or you can reach out to a contact who's listed on the website, perhaps. If you don't hear back from them, you just gotta let it go. That's just life. That's the way it is. If your project or proposal is accepted, then this is the beginning of a great opportunity and relationship going back to the stewardship. Make sure you do exactly what they ask you to do. If it's grant funding, they may want to have their logo on your website. If it's an RFP, they'll probably set a kickoff date meeting, and you just want to be really responsive and really, as my friend Tim Sopak in Winnipeg with the Manitoba Habitat Heritage Corporation always said to me, never miss an opportunity to say thank you. And that goes if you're not accepted as well, by the way. So another approach to all of this, I don't know why it keeps doing that. Sorry about this. This is almost like it's got a mind of its own. Boy. Don't wait for the right opportunity, create it. George Bernard Shaw. So what happens if there's nothing happening and you want to reach out on your own, which is actually a great approach. And you do this with.
Maybe just go ahead to the next slide. I'm wondering if it's on a timer.
Yeah, maybe somehow it just got.
All good.
Okay, thanks. And hopefully we don't jump from here too fast. There's a bit to cover. So create your own opportunity. And the way you can do this, it's called the letter of inquiry, but it's any kind of networking or reaching out. The letter of inquiry, however, is where you find a fit. And for example, with a foundation, they may not have a current call for proposals, or they may not be accepting proposals, but maybe you can inquire anyways. And I've had some success with this, working with an organization called Ducks Unlimited Canada, great organization, Wetland Habitat Conservation, where we looked at foundations in a region that focused on community and climate change solutions, and they weren't accepting any proposals, but we reached out to them and we identified a project that was in their region, and we focused on things that might appeal to their interests, going back to the discovery slide, and we wrote a letter of inquiry. Now, this letter of inquiry was, or the way we did it, 1 page. You might want to add some additional information afterwards, like just about the project or something, but really it's 1 page, short and to the point, identifying mutual values, potential collaboration, and requesting the opportunity to connect and contact. You're not asking for money. You're just identifying some synergies, and maybe it would be good to talk. We've had a lot of success with that, with grant funding. It's the same with if you're a business, let's say you're a business selling, I don't know, let's say it's a business that does promotional materials. It's marketing, right? You go out to an organization and say, hey, we do all of these promotional materials. We do t-shirts, we do, water bottles with your business's name on it. So it's going out and asking. So that's basically the letter of inquiry, or I guess another way is just the inquiry. So my top 10 takeaways from this presentation, and I'm going to look through my notes here also at the end to see if I've missed anything. The quick assessment, is it worth your while? RTM, read the manual twice, which is essentially reading the proposal or the application. Create a checklist that you can keep with you and follow. The discovery, know your business and know your audience or your client. Find a project that makes sense, samples that resonate, stories that resonate, follow the writing tips. You want to constantly be reviewing and revising, and you want to think like a reviewer. Don't despair. You will get better at this with practice. It does take time, and sometimes it can feel a bit wonky, kind of like this presentation at times with the PowerPoint. But you know what? You just push through it and have fun with it. You're building your brand, and I want to touch on this branding piece because, again, full circle back to your company identity. You want to make sure, if you can, that any proposal that you submit or grant application, that all of your branding collateral is up to date and that it matches, that it syncs with your proposal and application, because they are going to be going to your website. They are going to be looking to see if it's consistent and it's, you have all the relevant and accurate information and dates. And it also, the collateral, like a common sort of look and feel that, brands you. That's really, really important. So here I've highlighted 3 things in red, and I've highlighted them because they say that after a presentation, people only remember 3 or 4 things. So if I had 3 things to tell you, like as takeaways, I would say the quick assessment is going to save you so much time and effort on a grant application. If it's online, it's typically, eligibility criteria, for example, right there. On a RFP, which some of these RFPs can be 100 pages long. It's crazy, especially the ones from the government. There's a lot of jargon, but typically the information that you need to know is on the first page, which is the deadline. And then you go in and there's 3 sections that you need to know about. One is the statement of work, what they want you to do. The other is mandatory criteria. So you have to have these skills. Okay, you have to have been in business for 2 years, for example. And then the point rated criteria, which is where they rate your experience against others. So that's where you find it there. So the quick assessment, really, really important, save you a lot of time, and you'll get really good at looking for it and finding it. And it's either a go or a toss. And this discovery, knowing your audience and your client, knowing their business is really, really important. Again, as I said, people like to be heard. They want to know that you've listened to them. And this goes to the next, which is thinking like a reviewer. Really put yourself in the shoes of that person reviewing it, who's seeing, hundreds, maybe thousands of applications. And it's a very repetitive process too. So you need to stand out. I'd also just like to add one other thing that I haven't got on here, and that's about contacts. When I first went into business on my own in 2005, one of the most important things, and this is something my dad told me, is going to be your contacts. Your contacts all through your career are going to be so important. So when you do start applying for RFPs or grants, you want to set up, I guess, like, I don't know, even an Excel spreadsheet, a database of what you applied for, when, if you had a contact there, and just to keep track, because you never know if another opportunity is going to come back, or if you want to circle back, particularly in the case of RFPs, where you may want to make a contact there and reach out in a year or 6 months and see if they're looking for someone to do the work. Or for a grant, it may be a case of asking, are there going to be other grants available? So that's my presentation, and I really just want to thank everyone for being here, and I hope that I've added some value. to your work. It's a lot to go through, and it is more of a beginner. So for those of you who have done this quite a bit, I hope you can see it as a refresh. And before I stop for questions, I just really want to give a big shout out and thank you to Adelaide and Sarah and the whole Innovation Guelph team. This is an amazing organization with great resources, and even more importantly, the most supportive and wonderful team. I just am so grateful to be in your company, if I may say that. And I encourage everyone to look to this amazing group for the same. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Barbara. Thank you so much for those really kind words and for this amazing presentation. It was really fantastic. But yeah, so now we'd like to open it up for some questions. If you'd like to raise your hand or pop your question in the chat box, and we can read it out. So we'll just give everyone a couple minutes there if you'd like to think of a question. I can start with one that was submitted previously. So Barbara, is there a go-to for all government grants, such as a portal that you know of?
Yes, so a couple of the federal government bidding sites are Buy and Sell Canada, and I believe it's .ca. Mercs.com is another one. I can maybe put those, excuse me, in the chat. I just want to make sure I get the right URL. But if you Google Buy and Sell Canada and Mercs.com, those are the big federal ones. The other thing you can do is look at provincial bidding sites. So you go to each of the provinces. Again, you can Google that. And the other thing you can do is look at municipal bidding sites. So City of Guelph, City of Kingston, City of Lethbridge. And it's really interesting to follow some of these because, again, you really get a sense of where money is being invested. And I don't know what people's businesses are, but sometimes you think, oh, they would never want my services or my product. But you might be surprised, and I bring back the potato chip example for that. So yeah, so that's where I would start with the government ones. You can also look at sector organizational. So, Ag Canada has some great funding for innovation and technology that is making advancements in the agricultural sector. Yeah, and companies that specialize in it. Sustainable Development Technology Canada, which I believe is sdtc.ca, they fund innovation projects. I've actually done quite a bit of work with them, writing RFPs and evaluating RFPs for them. So that's another one that's really good.
Awesome, thank you. And I've made sure to note that so that we'll send that out to the participants so they have those sites. So just check and see if there's anybody in the chat. But it looks like I can go to another question that was submitted before the webinar. Do you have any specific tips for grants for creative writing or for theater?
Oh boy. Well, interestingly, my background actually is in fine arts. So I do have some knowledge of grants from the Canada Council for the Arts, etc., but not a lot. I mean, I think that's one that you would want to Google. In terms of advice on getting these grants, again, it's really important to look at the federal government agenda, because that's going to help you. There's a lot of funding, as there should be right now, for Indigenous arts and creative projects. There's a lot of funding for marginalized communities, arts projects. Climate change is a big one, which I've mentioned. So really, again, going and looking at who they funded before, what's on their agenda, and how you can fit into that. That's sort of the best advice I can give for now. But very important, the arts, really a big fan of the arts, and hoping to see that with all of this other funding available, that we don't forget about our artists and creative individuals and groups. It's really important.
For sure. Thank you for that. And I just had one more written down, that unless you've already covered what you wanted to say about Carol's question regarding any good examples from RFPs that you've worked with in the past or grant proposals, unless you've covered that already.
Well, I mean, I sort of did. I think for RFPs, I think it's really about presenting information almost in a report format. So you've got your cover page, you've got your table of contents, you've got your letter of introduction. This is what I'm about, with a few highlights. This is what our business is about. This is specifically how we can help you. And then you jump into what they've asked for, and you present it in an order that is exactly how they've asked for it. And really succinct, clear. And here's another thing that I didn't mention, which I probably should have in the presentation, is real life examples. So it's not, don't tell me about what you've done, show me what you've done. So, you know, I can say that I'm a communications company. I've been in business since 2005. But if I say I've advanced the communication goals of 50 different organizations over a 10-year period by, you know, helping them to communicate their message, that says a lot more than just something like, don't tell, show. And that's where you can bring in quotes and testimonials and things like that.
Great, that's it for questions. Over to you, Adelaide.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again, Barbara. There were certainly a lot of excellent takeaways that I hope others found helpful. It's always wonderful to hear about the letter of inquiry, right? You don't want to wait for opportunities, but rather to create them. And another takeaway for me was, you know, keeping those connections and those people in your network. I've known Barbara for quite some time, so it's been wonderful to welcome you back to Innovation Guelph for today's Toolkit Tuesday. If anyone on today's call would like to connect with Barbara, please reach out to Sarah or myself for an introduction, and we can walk you through the different options. Within the next few business days, you will also receive a copy of this presentation as well as the recording. And before you all disappear, Sarah will post a feedback form link into the chat. Please click on that and share your thoughts with us on today's session, on the Toolkit Tuesday series in general. Is there a topic that you'd like us to present on in the future? To let us know. Please feel free to follow us on social media or tweet or post about your experience with us today. Additionally, if you are an Innovation Guelph client or an alumni, Barbara is a perk partner with Innovation Guelph. So if you are interested in receiving a free consultation, a request for proposal assessment, any special rates for application submission, training on best practices, Sarah will also include a link into the chat momentarily that includes an interest form that you can submit for next steps for working with Barbara. Again, sincere thank you to you, Barbara, to our Asign interpreters, Jeanette and Courtney, to our sponsors, to Sarah, and to all of you here today. Thanks so much for being here. Have a great afternoon, and I hope to see you on the screen again soon. Take care, everybody.